We are visitors on this planet. We are here for 90 or 100 years at the very most. During that period, we must try to do something good, something useful with our lives. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal, the true meaning of life. With this quote of Dalai Lama, we would like to invite you to another episode of the second season of the heygroentje podcast. And I would like to welcome Daniëlle alongside me, who will also tell us what we are going to talk about and why we chose the topic that we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, let's first start with hi. Nice that everyone is listening again. And what is the topic we are going to talk about and why? We are going to talk about, are we with too many people on planet Earth?
Yeah, and this was a topic you were quite enthusiastic about. And what's the reason for that?
Yeah, I think in the last episode we announced that we are pregnant, and that was also why we had a big break. And during the pregnancy you start to read more about a lot of different topics, and one of the topics is, are there not too many people on Earth already? Mm-hmm. And sometimes if I'm on certain websites where I read more about the environment, about veganism, I see that some people are saying that should I don't want children, or should I have children because it's already going so bad with the Earth, there are already so many problems. So it's a topic that is going around. And I have my thinking about it. I know you have your thinking about it. And I thought maybe it's nice to answer some questions, like what do we think? Are we with too many people on this planet Earth?
Yeah, and as you said, we are going to have a child soon. So it might seem that we are also a bit biased. Some people would
maybe
think in our answer. Which we also are, because we would not really say that having children is bad and then continue with having children. So, but the thing is, we have discussed it since we know each other, about the impact we as humans have on this planet, and we are one of the most dangerous species on this planet, which threatens the existence of millions of plant and animal species. I can't recall any other species which has had so much of an impact on nature.
Yeah, so that's why I also understand sometimes the topics online that people are questioning, should we have more children? Are we not with enough already? Yeah. So we understand those questions.
Yeah. And because of there's also a lot of misinformation around, which I think has the capacity to influence some people's decision because of what they see in the media and how things have been portrayed in the last years regarding population growth.
Then maybe we can start with some numbers. You're always the guy who's coming with the facts. Yeah. So maybe you can, because I don't know a lot about the facts. I just know what I'm reading and I know my feelings. Yeah. But you dived a bit deeper into the topic already before. So
that's right. You said facts. So most of my facts come from a book called Factfulness from Hans Rosling. He was a professor of demography at a university in Sweden. He passed away unfortunately in 2017, and during that period I followed a course in demography at my university, where I learned a lot about population. It was a course which I passed in I think 3 attempts, but still it remains one of the courses which has had a big impact on my life.
Yeah, I also remember that you told me, many times about that topic you had.
Yeah, and there's so much data around, but one to start with, which most people don't realize, and which I also didn't know before I followed this course and I looked at the real numbers, is that our population growth as humans has already started to slow down. So I was really surprised when I got to know about the data that the number of children on Earth has already stabilized. So children, under 18, the amount of children under 18 has been constant since the early 2000s. I don't remember the exact year, but there was a particular year in early 2000s when the amount of children they stabilized in the world, and that would mean that the amount of children would not increase and the population growth will come from people living longer lives in many countries, and that's the reason for population growth mainly, and that's what it's going to be like on average.
Okay, so maybe to get it a bit more simple again, like they're not coming more babies, like the babies like stabilized?
Yeah, there will be, but they will be at a replacement level.
Yeah. So one person dies, one baby comes.
Yeah, something like that. In many countries, it's even slowing down. So you see trends like many countries in Europe, like take for example for Netherlands. If there was no immigration in the Netherlands, then the population would actually start declining. So the Dutch by themselves are not having enough babies to replace them. So to replace a population as a couple, you need to have more than 2 children. Then you have an impact. If you have 2 children, then you stay at the replacement level. So the mother and father are replaced by 2 people, and then the generation dies out, and that's how it goes. In Netherlands, that's actually less than 2. So if there was no immigration, no people coming and settling from outside, that would even go down. In Japan, it's happening. So for example, Japan has a very difficult immigration process, and they have quite a lot of difficulty now to maintain their population levels. I know this because I followed courses under a Japanese professor of mine, and I got quite interested in the culture of Japan and how things are, and I got to know that there are villages in Japan that are completely empty because there's no one living there, no one wants to live, or they are completely empty because people just died out.
That's also happening a bit in Italy, right?
Yeah,
there are a lot of villages in Italy that are just dying out because there are not enough people.
Yeah. And now I think some people would think we directly started talking about something opposite of what you listen on the news or have been listening on the news about population explosion, that we are with too many people and we need to stop growing in number. It has already stopped down, and from our talk you would think, how is it possible? You're talking about less number of people on the planet, while the problem is the opposite, the problem that is portrayed by the mainstream media.
Yeah, but that is more you're explaining because people are getting older at this point, like the facilities in the hospitals, they're becoming better and better, so people are just getting older, and that's why we're with so many people now.
Yeah, that's the main reason also, but it will be a bigger influence in the future, that people will live longer lives, so that means there will be in general more people, which will also stabilize. There's a point that I want to talk about it, like usually we are so passionate about this topic that we dive deep into it, like from the word go. But I always like also a little bit of structure in a podcast. So the things we wanted to talk about, the first point we already kind of addressed. What is the reason we want to talk about this topic? Or why we are with too many people on this planet? Are we with too many people on this planet? Then we look at the history of humankind's growth in numbers. We see like how we came to like almost now 8 billion people that we are on this planet. Then we move on to what kind of misconceptions do people have when it comes to the number of people we have on this planet. We already discussed one of it, that people think we are with too many. But we'll also try to debunk it with some data and our perceptions about it. And last but not the least, we talk about are having kids really bad for the sustainability and our planet. So yeah, these four areas that we are going to discuss, I think.
And I would like to add that we are maybe giving in this podcast some more information, some more data.
Yeah.
If you want to read some things back or see some interesting articles, we always write a blog on our website where you can find everything back.
Yeah, it will. All the links would be there to back up what we say.
Yeah.
And of course, not all the times like we know all the numbers like to the point, but the real numbers you can find back on the So like I'm curious about what you think about like the history of the human population. Like what ideas do you have? Because I have the numbers, of course. But what do you think, and what did you think before? Are we with too many people, and how do you think that this growth happened?
It's a difficult question because what you say, I didn't dive that deep into it as you did.
Yeah, but that's fine.
But I just think that like many years back, there were a lot of sicknesses happening.
Yeah.
So people were dying younger.
Mm-hmm.
But then things changed, like in the time of the, how is it calling, the revolution?
Yeah, the agricultural industrial revolution.
Yeah. I think from that point things changed.
Yeah.
And things changed quite quick.
Yeah.
Like if you see what doctors can do now, I'm sometimes really amazed by it.
Mm-hmm.
That they can cure you so easy, what is maybe also not always the best, because of that we don't really learn from mistakes we make. But
the most important is that we could get rid of diseases, deadly diseases that were caused due to the environment that we were living in. To name a few, it can be like smallpox, for example. Like we developed like vaccines in that time, like of against many diseases that could help us live to a age that we could never ever imagine before.
And I think because of these changes, the population also grew.
Yeah, that's right. I think I think most people have this thinking. So I think most people are on the same page about this. I think you don't have to be like, you don't have to study demography in and out to know this. So you were right about it. Like most of the changes,
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, most of the changes in population that happened in the last 200 years, but humankind is like thousands of years, millions of years there. And for thousands of years, the growth was limited. So we were like a few million in numbers here and there, and we didn't really settle down at places. And at the moment we started to settle down in civilizations and growing in numbers, practicing agriculture on a large scale, that's when the growth started happening. Mm-hmm. So in the last 200 years, only we reached like to the 7 billion mark. And 1804, that is a little above 200 years back, we hit the first billion. So you can imagine in 200 billion times, the population went from 1 billion to more than 7 billion. So
you mean in 200 years time?
In 200 years time,
Yeah.
we added 6 billion people on the planet.
That's a lot in just 200 years.
Yeah.
So I can also imagine that, if you hear this number, you are a bit shocked because, for a long time we just lived with 1 billion.
Yeah.
And in just 200 years it became 7 billion.
So there you also see the link with Industrial Revolution, because in the 1900s, the Industrial Revolution started. The making of the wheel and steam engine and factories, mass-produced goods and food products.
Yeah, it was easier to get also food.
Yeah. So that was the reason for this growth. And the population growth, the growth itself, so not the number, growth rate means at the rate at which we are growing, it peaked in the 20th century. So the 1980s, 1990s, something like that, that was the peak of the growth. And from then, the growth has slowed. But the growth looks bigger on picture because we are with 7 billion people. So there would of course be a few million added every year.
And do the scientists do they know how far we will still grow?
It's going down already. So
we will not get above 7 billion.
There are two books that I would like to reference that I also read. One is Population by John Weeks. It's an introduction to the concepts and issues of demography, that is the study of population, and Factfulness, and all the videos from Hans Rosling. I really loved his videos, and really
we watched quite a few together.
Yeah, his TED Talk is called The Best Stats That You Have Ever Seen. Is a way of showing data in a playful manner and in a really interesting manner, which will change most people's worldviews.
I think that also changed my thinking when you showed me that video.
Yeah, so the population growth has been going down actually, but the thing is there's no way that we can slow it further down because it will have really bad consequences. Hans Rosling himself said in the video, nothing short of a civil war or murdering people on a large scale can stop this growth. It is bound to happen. We cannot limit it anymore because, as you know, the amount of children has stabilized. The growth is going down already. There's only way of getting rid of people is literally getting rid of them, and which no one would want because it's really sad.
Because I remember in the real COVID time, it's still around, but when it was really at its peak, the COVID, a lot of people were also saying, it's a way to get rid of people because we are with too many.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason to do with that is that most of the world, how people in the West generally perceive the world, is actually worse than it is out there. So things, that's also something I learned from Hans Rosling, is that things are going better than you actually think about. We discussed it just before the podcast. We had a talk about it. What do you think is the growth rate of Bangladesh, for example? How many children per woman a Bangladeshi woman is having on average? Because if you see a country like Bangladesh, people think big population, growing at a really fast rate.
I know the numbers for Netherlands, and I know a bit the numbers for India.
You know, for Netherlands it's less than 2 already.
Yeah, it's most families in Netherlands, they're having 1, 2, some are having 3 children. And of course there are some people that are having more, but I think the average is 1 to 3, something like that. You say it's even less than 2.
It's less than 2,
Yeah.
1.9, 1.8, something like that.
I know in India that most families are also having around 2 children.
Yeah, that's correct. A little lower, I think it's 2.1 in India, average.
But if I see in your family, for example, everyone is having 2 children.
Yeah, that's right.
So if I think about Bangladesh, it's close to India.
Yeah.
So I also think that there the average will be around 2.
It's 2.5.
Yeah, so it's a bit more.
But the funny thing is that this question was asked because I really like the way Hans Rosling carries out his. He has like a quiz, and he asks university students these questions, and most people chose 5 as an answer. So he.
Are we now talking about the misconceptions a bit?
Yeah. This is about like a little bit about the misconceptions that people have.
Yeah. But they said 5?
Yeah, so that's what people think, that it has a fertility rate of 5 children, which is not true, because in the last years a lot has changed, and family planning has come. Education is like almost, I think all children, 90% plus are going to school, including women. And when women get educated, you already see family sizes getting smaller, because there's more education regarding everything, regarding birth control, regarding family size, family planning.
Yeah, getting children a bit later also.
Yeah. So these things are already far ahead in the world in many countries. So one data I remember, 80% of all children in the world are going to school now, which people are wouldn't really believe if you said it like. If you ask them in a quiz, for example.
Yeah. But what is maybe also a bit confusing for people in the West, if we see videos about countries in Africa or countries in Asia like Bangladesh, then you see always big families together.
Yeah.
And you always see a lot of children together. But that doesn't mean that all the children come from one woman, because families also live together more often than here in the West.
Yeah, we started with misconceptions, and I think this topic is the biggest, like, that we'll talk about, because there's so many of them. One thing I learned, like also during my course, is that you should never, and this is also an important part from the book Factfulness by Hans Rosling. You should, like when you have data, you should not look at data just by itself and start making stories in your head about it. So if someone says, for example, that China is the biggest emitter of CO2 in the world, or is bigger than US, and it emits like so many thousand metric tons of CO2, you should look at a little bit of context. And people forget the context, that when you compare China to the US, China is 4 times the population of the US, so of course, like the emissions would be higher because there are more people living in China. So a better measure would be to see per capita how much is being used, and then China is nowhere near US, like an average US person.
Yeah.
So when you look at numbers, you should always look at like in terms of, like you should always be able to compare in period of time, like back and forth with the same country, with comparing with other countries, and there are many more factors that are behind like a data. Yeah,
you cannot compare like a big country with a lot of people to a country with less amount of people.
Yeah, and I think this brings me also to the biggest misconception that people have, is that it's a little bit overlapping to the third point as well, but it's the last point, so I'll already bring it up, is that that having children are not good for sustainability and the planet. The thing that I mentioned just about like that average per capita consumption of someone in a developed country is way more than someone in a developing or emerging economy. So it can be that one child in the US or in Europe is using over his or her lifetime maybe 20 times, 30 times the resources as someone in Africa or in Afghanistan or Bangladesh.
Yeah.
So one child equal to what 30 children like in a developing country are using. in terms of resources, in terms of just look at when people ask what kind of resources, because they want to go into that. Just starting from food, for example, how much meat and dairy they would consume in their lifetime, how many electronic goods, how much stuff they will use in their lifetime, how many times, how many like cars they will end up owning in their lifetime, the energy used at home, how many times they will travel by plane. So for example, like out of the whole world, did you know that like we are with almost 8 billion people, but not even 1 billion are capable of traveling by plane?
Yeah.
So that has also big impact.
I also know, I'm not sure if I'm completely right, but I know that in Netherlands, like the Earth Overshoot Day is somewhere in May in spring. I just wanted to say spring to be safe. But in Bangladesh, there is no Earth Overshoot.
They are below that. So just to mention also to our listeners, like Earth Overshoot Day, that there's a website also that exists by this name. It tells you like the resources that a country is using for a whole year, and it should be actually like a matching one, because that means you're then living in harmony with nature. The amount of resources you are using is not more than what is out there. So in Netherlands, the amount that they should be using with the size of land that they have and the number of people that are there in Netherlands are exhausted only in the first is it like 5 months? Less than half a year for the planet. So and if everyone would live like the Dutch, that we don't have enough resources to support our planet.
And there are even countries that it's already before May. I cannot mention them now out of my head, but I know that there are countries they are done in February or March.
That brings me to the pin code of the world, like how I see it. I find this concept also quite interesting, because I see just imagine like the world as a pin code with different areas, and I think I talked about this also in the previous podcast.
It's possible.
So the current world pin code is like a 4-letter number. I'll tell you like what all the 4 letters correspond to. Currently it's 1114, and every number is a billion people, and the first is the continent of America, north and south, and then
so 1 for North and South combined.
1 billion people living in North and South America together, and then there's 1 billion people living in Europe, 1 billion people currently living on the continent of Africa, and 4 billion people living in Asia.
And Australia is part under
Australia
Asia.
is part of Western Europe.
Oh, Western Europe.
We see it as Western Europe, so including that. But Australia is very marginal. It's like few millions.
So most people like.
So currently the world pin code is like 1114. If you calculate this, it's like 4 plus 3, 7 billion people currently on this planet. We are approaching 8 billion, it's going to change even further, and people will be shocked by this number, because in 2100, from like around 75 years from now, the pin code of the world is going to change. The first 2 letters, the first 2 numbers will be the same. So in America, South America together will be 1 billion people. In Europe, there will be only 1 billion people also. It will be stable. It will even go down a little bit, but remain around 1, and mostly due to immigration. Otherwise, it would go even further down. In Africa, the code will change from 1 to 4. So there will be 3 billion people added in Africa.
That's a big amount of people in just 75 years.
And in Asia, 1 billion people will be added. So you see, in Asia, the growth is also slowed down. From 4 by the end of this century, it will only become 5.
And the reason that Africa will grow, is that because things become
this growth
better
has
there,
already started. This growth has already started, and we cannot really do anything to stop it.
But what is the reason for the growth?
Because of family planning, because of getting rid of deadly diseases, people will be living longer lives.
Yeah.
And currently many countries are having, because of the reason that child mortality remains a big problem there. So, for example, Nigeria, an average woman is having 6 to 7 children, and we cannot and we should not blame a Nigerian woman for having that many children, because there is a reason for it. It will go down, of course, like in the coming years, but the healthcare advancements will also pick up, because of which people will live longer lives.
Yeah, but it's important. You said because I think it's important to mention this. You said like a Nigerian woman has like 6 to 7 children.
Yeah.
And there is a reason for that.
Yeah.
And what is that reason? That reason is, right, that there is a big chance that not all 7 children will become...
There's a big chance that maybe 2 or 3 survive.
Yeah.
And the rest, because child mortality is on the higher side because of it's just an underdeveloped country.
Yeah.
So you see like what dramatic change is going to happen, but it depends on how you see it. You can see it as a good thing or a bad thing. After the year 2100, this will go down further. So it will not increase anymore. In Africa also, it will stabilize to 4 billion people. We have to work as a continent, as like Earth, really hard to provide for these 11 billion people that is projected, because this is like the average projection that we will be going to 11 billion, and from there we will go down further. And then will there be a moment where there will be a lot of old people together at the same time. So I don't know what we'll name these people, like because we had like names such as boomers before. So I think there will be a concept that will come then as well. So there will be moments in time. It's already happening in China. The population is going down further. India, I think this year or next year will overtake China as growing in population. It will go maybe to 1.5, 1.6 billion, and from there India will also go down further. Like the population decline will start in these 2 countries, and it will hit them also quite hard, because a lot of people will grow old at the same time. China will be a country that has it will be the first country that will become older before getting really rich as well. So if you look at these changes, you see like these are already in process, and it's quite difficult to get this process like to change it. Only thing we can do is to enable people to have better lives, at least decent lives, have a roof above their head, have clean water, access to clean water, have access to good healthy food, less meat and dairy, which will lead towards sustainable growth, and that we could really sustain all these people on the planet.
Yeah, and if you're telling these numbers that we will grow to 11 billion people, I understand that people are a bit in shock, because things are not going good right now. We really have problems with the climate, and if more people will come, there will be more problems. So are having kids really that bad for a sustainable?
I would like it's maybe bad to say that, but I think in a way I would rather I would be more worried if the first 2 pin codes were changing in a way that it went from 1 to 4 billion in America and in Europe. I think that would be really drastic for the Earth, especially because of the amount of resources are told currently being used. Of course, in Africa and in Asia,
things also change.
Things will also change. People will get better lives, and they would want to also use more stuff, and that's where also the challenge lies. But because of I think as I said, in America and Europe, an average person currently is using way more resources, sometimes as many as almost 30 people one person is using in one of these developed countries,
Yeah.
that is more detrimental on the planet, and that's what we have to tackle.
So it's a bit a yes and a no.
Yeah.
And this is also something we discussed before starting with children. And
yeah,
we are really trying to make it as sustainable as possible.
Yeah.
So we are now busy with like, which things do we need for the baby?
Yeah.
And you can get everything, but like really everything you can get secondhand.
Yeah.
So we are looking to buy things secondhand. We are going to use like diapers you can reuse, like washable diapers.
Yeah.
So there are some things in the
because
West.
I think a lot of people don't know that like the diapers that you can, the use and throw ones, they are really bad for the environment.
Yeah.
They cannot be degraded like ever. Like it can take like hundreds, thousands of years before they break down, and they have like really bad chemicals in it which pollute microplastics that will wipe out all the species in the oceans, for example.
Yeah.
And can you imagine going further, 4 + 5, 9 billion people in Asia, and the growth that is coming in Africa, all using these diapers, which were developed in the Industrial Revolution for sure. But the current methods in many of these households currently is already like better. So why do a lot of big corporations have to push and market their products in these countries in the name of swelling their profits and their pockets? And this is one example to show that how we can sustain these people. This is just one example. And if you see, I think the way they are living now, and if they get, of course, I said, access to clean water, better food, so real sustainable development, not the one that is pushed to us as greenwashing, but real sustainable development, then we can for sure sustain all these people. Because there's also a point from veganism into this, because most of the world feed, what we are growing now, is going to billions of land mammals that are consumed. A lot of food is thrown away as well. 40% of the food in Europe is wasted, 30 to 40%. Most of the feed that we are producing, grains, is actually fed to the animals, a very unsustainable way of feeding. So we have enough food for all these people. We have enough food for 20 billion people. Yeah. We have enough resources for 20 billion people.
We are just not using it.
And we will be at the half of that, and I find it really annoying that still we think that we are with too many people on the planet. Yeah. But the problem is we are with too many people. We are with less people who are using too much, who are causing a lot of damage.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we are with too many people, but we are with the wrong people, and a small section of people who are doing wrong things, who need to change their ways, and who need to understand that that they have to lead by example, and let other people make the right choices, not the choices that they made in the past. So just with the diaper example, so not want that late in maybe 100 years from now, 3 billion Africans would be using diapers in their homes, which are being used now with all those chemicals, and that can be thrown away, because the planet cannot have it. You cannot think that we can produce beef and chicken and sheep and fish for like all these people that are coming on an industrial scale, package it and put it on supermarket shelves. So those things are really, really going to be detrimental for our planet's health.
Yeah, and I think it's good to end with that. To like, I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of information. And the only thing I want to add to it is that I really hope that our baby will follow our footsteps in being sustainable, being vegan, and is not that kid that is using everything from the earth.
One last point I want to make before we shut down this podcast is the concept of ecological footprint. So I mentioned one person in a developed country using resources from 30 people from a developing country. And I like to back up some data from the book Population from John Weeks. You see ecological footprint, first of all, is defined as the land and water area required to support indefinitely the material standard of living of a given human population. So the land and water that they use, like generally.
Yeah.
So for example, and that's always measured in like acres or hectares. Like I would mention the hectare area, and 1 hectare is approximately 2.5 acres, and 1 acre is like the size of a football field, American football field. So that means that kind of area a human needs for growing its food, having water, disposing of its waste, and all. In countries like Qatar, it's 12 per person.
Yeah.
So 12 hectares of area that is needed to produce all the goods, because there are also, for example, all the iPhones and the Lamborghinis of the rich Qataris and expensive houses and villas that need a lot of electronics to get them going. That means the ecological footprint is like around 12. And I'll take the other end of the example, Afghanistan, it's 0.5.
Such a big difference.
It's half a hectare. Some top countries, Denmark is 8, New Zealand 8 almost, United States 7.2, Australia 6.7, Canada 6.4, Switzerland 5.1, Netherlands 5.3,
Yeah.
China 2.1, India 0.87, Indonesia 1.1, Nigeria 1.4, Mexico 3. So you see, like with the kind of countries I mentioned and the amount of resources that they use. So it's really about rich and poor here, and it's about like trying to change for good, trying to be more sustainable, trying to find ways of being more sustainable than rather blaming everything on population explosion.
Yeah.
And I myself have been guilty of these things. I always thought, because of mainstream media, that we need to have less people on the planet. But now I realize it's about what kind of life we lead with the number of people we have on the planet that has a bigger impact. And with that, like, I would like to end the podcast. Thanks a lot for listening.
And again, if you want to read some things back from all the information we
There's
give you.
There's a lot of data.
Yeah, there's a lot of data.
Yeah.
Just read the blog that is came
but
online
presented
on our website.
in an interesting way. And I would for sure recommend you to listen to the TED Talk, The Best Stats Ever by Hans Rosling. It will be the first one, the link, and let us know your comments about it. Like, and if it really and change your mind and your thinking about Earth.
Yeah.
So see you in another podcast, and wish you a nice day ahead.